everybody, welcome back to The Followers. So it's episode, I have no idea what episode it is, but we had a very good guest on today. It was thoroughly entertaining. We were talking to Amy McGuire, and it's actually been a while since we've had a nutritionist on, so I think I speak for all three of us, and it was good to nerd out about nutrition again. But yeah, John, it was a really entertaining episode, but what got really stuck in your mind, or what stuck out with you?
Yeah, really entertained. I particularly liked the way at the end when we started doing some rapid fire questions and stuff, Amy gave the rapid fire answer but then gave a nice bit of context to back it up. Also really interested to hear how many plates she has spinning at the minute, but seems to keep them all going really well. Damien, what was your favourite part?
Just loving her approach through, I suppose, a strength conditioning course into, just highlighting the importance of, I suppose, the role or the amount of information that students are learning from a nutrition perspective, and just the clarity in around that, you know, you're doing a strength conditioning course with a few modules on, on nutrition to give you a basis on it, and not, you know, coming out of college kind of thinking the exact opposite. That too, and her insights into, I suppose, the construction industry that she's currently experiencing as well. There was a lot of insights there for us too.
Yeah, I think everyone will be really pleased to hear that. Amy takes very much a practical and how to live real life approach to eating, is in no way restrictive, but just make sure you are enjoying your food. Thankfully, Amy, with the last 2 weeks of Easter holidays, you've been putting it to use with planning this extension and stuff, and branching out of the world of nutrition and more into the world of construction.
Yeah, hard hat at the ready, lads, all the time, you know. I know step by step now, measurements of windows, laying foundations, block laying, you name it, now I have it. But yeah, no, nice little distraction at the moment. I'll be glad to see the end of it, but yeah, no, it's a nice thing to look forward to.
You've been busy enough over the last while with lecturing LIT, doing your own PhD research, working with a few teams and everything as well. Would you mind giving us just a little bit of background as to how you ended up where you are with all of it even?
Yeah, so look, I suppose my full-time job is a lecturer, and I think I was, if I'm being honest, I was probably the best of a bad bunch going for that particular interview, because I didn't think in a month of Sundays I was going to get the job lecturing up in Carlow, but got it. And I think I started lecturing in 2015, and I was travelling 3 hours a day, which, you know, took its toll. So then when a job came up in LIT, I applied for that, and I was kind of nearly offered that on the day, which again was a bit of a shock. I think I had imposter syndrome for about a decade. So I got that. It was a lot closer to home. It was based in Thurles, so, and I was actually renting in Thurles at the time, so it really, really suited. And then when I started working in LIT, I got a lot of, I suppose, field work. And I got, the office that I work in, nearly everybody's involved with teams as well, which wasn't really as common when I was lecturing up in Carlow. Plus, I wouldn't have had the time with the commute. So through various different people that I worked with in LIT, I got some workshops, did a bit with teams, and then I started working with the under-20s for TIP, for the football. And I was working with David for a couple of years, maybe 2 years, and then he got the call then for the senior team with the lads, and he rang me the day of the hurlers homecoming and asked would I be interested in taking up the role with the senior footballers. And I'll be honest, lads, I probably would have died for the county that day. So I agreed, and I'll be honest, at first I was like, I'm after biting off way too much here. Full-time lecturing gig, was trying to do my PhD as well. Myself and my husband then were also kind of running a personal training studio with classes, but to be honest with you, it just all fell into place, and I worked with a really, really good bunch. My boss in LIT is really, really supportive of us doing, you know, external work. She really sees the value in bringing the practical side of things, you know, into our teaching. I got some really, really good interns to work with me. I was able to give them work experience. So yeah, there's been times when I have been brutal at work-life balance, but COVID has definitely taught me to slow down a little bit, and I'm kind of enjoying it now. And we closed the personal training studio. That was just something with COVID that we just couldn't keep going. My husband's involved with GAA as well, so, and he's doing his PhD as well. So we kind of both decided, you know what, this is the direction we're going to go in. So when we kind of let go of that, we were kind of able to probably take on a little bit more. I took on Waterford GAA then as well. So I suppose that's how I got to where I am, and it's just a fantastic thing that you can have a full-time job that you don't see as a job. Like it's brilliant teaching people all the time. There's hard parts as well, like I'm not going to let on it's glamorous every single day, but it's very rewarding. And then you get to work with like elite athletes, you know, some of the counties or the countries even best athletes. Like it's phenomenal. And look, as I said, it's not all glamour. Like, I mean, you're doing urine testing there on a Sunday morning. Like, I mean, there's no shiny way of looking at that, but at the same time, you know, it's all part of the job.
And that department in LIT, like you've Damien Young, Saoirse Bulff and Michael Fennelly all there as well. So there's a lot of people like with experience in the field or in the trenches coming back in to lecture then as well.
Yeah, and like it's great as well because at certain times of the year we're all in the same boat, you know. So like we're all in the middle of pre-season, or you know, we're all in a little bit of an off season, and we're all into research as well. I think Michael's just about finished his PhD. Damien finished his, like they're also really inspirational people as well. Like Damien Young is one of the hardest workers I have ever met in my life. Like he's just complete career goals. Like he did his PhD in 3 years, and he's also a full-time lecturer and analyst with Tip and coach with Drum and Inch, and like, you know, so when you've those kind of people working beside you, it's contagious. So you're kind of like 24 hours in the day, I'll work for 20, no problem. So yeah, no, it's great. LIT is a super place to grow and nurture your external abilities, let's just say.
And you were in Carlow for a while before that, you said, was it?
Yeah, 2 years, yeah.
Academically, how did you end up there? Like, what was your, like, I suppose, college route to get into those roles?
Yeah, so I suppose nowadays it's probably a little bit more direct, where you can do a master's in sport and exercise nutrition, or you can even do an undergrad now in it. Whereas back, I won't say how long ago, but back then, it wasn't as direct. So I did exercise and health science in Waterford. And then from there, then I knew I wanted to get into lecturing. I actually Googled it. Like, I hadn't a clue how you became a lecturer, because there was just so many different ways that I asked my lecturers, and they had all different routes and avenues that they took. So I was like, right, I have to do a master's. But at that time, so like, I think that was 2010 when I finished my undergrad. It was 2010. And I was like, right, I don't know what I'm going to do. And the masters weren't really something that interested me. So I waited a year, and I was, or maybe 2 years, I think. And I applied for a new master's in UL, which was in sports performance, and it's still going strong. But I didn't get it the first time round. And like, it was something I was probably nearly embarrassed to admit up until a couple of years ago. But like, I didn't get it the first time round, and I got it then the second time round. So I worked hard at it, and I actually did my internship over in South Africa, which was a great thing to add to the CV. And then I came back and I worked as a manager or duty manager in a leisure centre for a little while. And I ended up, I knew I kind of had to get in teaching somewhere. So I actually worked for ETB, which is kind of like FOSS. And I worked with people who were on the live register, you know, so people at the time, it was like the recession. And if you weren't, you know, actively looking for work, you had to do a course if you wanted to, you know, receive your money every week or whatever. Oh my God, that was hard. That was hard. Like, you know, people were there, they didn't want to be there. And I think actually, to be honest with you, because of my experience with managing difficult people, that was what stood to me getting the job in Carlow. Because I had a master's, but I had no teaching experience, and I had no research done. I wasn't even started on my PhD at that time. So that's kind of the route I took. And when I actually started working in Carlow, then I took on my postgraduate diploma in sports nutrition. So it wasn't actually until I started lecturing that I said, you know what, I'm going to go back and do a little bit more and become specialised in nutrition.
Where did you do that through is that the ISSN one or
yeah?
is that
So yeah, I did
the one Lauren Bannock runs.
Yeah, so I started that. I think I started that in 2016 I did that. But the ISSN exam is one of the hardest exams I've ever done in my life. It was so tough. And it's a really high pass rate. You should get over 70. And like, it was 200 questions to answer in 2 hours. It was just mayhem. Yeah.
No, it's actually, your background was quite similar to ours there, where we took slight about turns. We got to know each other from doing our masters, did the exercise nutrition science one in Chester, and that's how we got to know each other. It's also interesting now that there's a bit of a team developing with the amount of people who've come on here and have done the sports performance masters, and we're like really advertising for them at this stage.
I know, like, I mean, to be fair, like, even the caliber of lecturers, you know, down there, like, they've been there donkey's years, they've so much experience, and they're all so sound. Like, you could contact them now. Like, I'm gone nearly 8 years now, and like, they still remember you, and they're still so helpful. I think, like, one of them is actually going to be my external or my Viva transfer for my PhD. Like, you know, Catherine Orange, just pure sound out. Like, you just couldn't meet nicer.
Yeah, she had a few years at Munster and all like that, didn't she?
Yeah, like, she's class.
And that brings us on into your PhD research. So you're doing that through WIT. What stage yet? Well, I suppose you're getting somewhere near your transfer Viva if you're just bringing that up.
Yeah, well, I should have had that done a good while now, to be honest. But a few little obstacles got in my way. So I think first year round, there was a piece of equipment that needed to be replaced, and it took a year. So that literally knocked a year off. Then I went to Canada teaching for a semester, and that knocked another 5 or 6 months off, but I wrote a systematic review over there, so it wasn't so bad. And then COVID. So I've been a year pretty much without collecting data. But my area is, I'm looking at energy availability, and REDS, I suppose it's kind of commonly known as now. And initially I started off investigating whether it's prevalent in endurance athletes, males in particular, and if it is prevalent, what associations are there? So what's the hormonal effect? What's the effect on bone? What's the effect on the heart? What's the effect on metabolism? So I was looking at assessing them pre-season, in-season, and then off-season. And off-season is probably an odd one, but the reason I was looking at off-season is because I wanted to see how long it would take for, like, it's normal for cortisol to be high during the competition season, but I wanted to see, would it come down? Would it come back to baseline? And similar with testosterone, would it come back to baseline? Because it's probably going to be a little bit lower due to the stress and the load that the body's been placed under. So my initial study was to, as I said, assess over 3 time points. I had about 20 athletes lined up, and I ended up only collecting, I'd say, half of the data that I needed to, because like with that, just with COVID, we just couldn't get back in, and because there was no races, I couldn't get any competition data. So even if they were like doing their own training, I couldn't really consider it, you know, race and season. So I kind of had to put a halt to that, and I decided to change route, and this is why my transfer Viva has taken so long, because I decided to move over to GAA instead, because I was like, you know what, I've access to 30, 40, 50 on any given time of the season, elite male athletes. I already have the data collected, I just wasn't putting the papers together. Now it's going to be what we'd call field-based data. So in other words, like, I'm using, instead of using a DEXA, I'm using skin folds. You know, but look, at the same time, I suppose it's going to have a better practical application, because who's going to send a team of 40 down to get DEXA scans, you know, Douglas bag methods, you know, where you're putting the bag over the head, you know, to assess RMR and stuff like that. It's probably more real world the way I'm doing it now, and it's far quicker as well. So that's the kind of route I'm taking. I'm looking at pre-season and in-season. I initially wasn't going to look at hormones, because I had to collect blood and all that, and it was going to be a bit of an issue. But my husband is doing his PhD in monitoring load and readiness to train and stuff like that. So he's after finding this apparatus that you can use to test saliva, like, immediately. So he hasn't fully agreed to it yet, but I'm kind of piggybacking on that. So I'm kind of hoping that he will allow me to use the apparatus when the off season comes, especially, so I can see if the levels drop or increase depending on what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm hoping to have it all done, written up and everything by next year. So
I'm aiming for the very same. Hopefully we'll finish around the same time. Yeah, a few things to unpack there. You said REDS, that's relative energy deficiency in sport. Could you just give us a little explainer on that, please?
Yeah, so essentially what I'm trying to investigate is, I suppose initially what we thought was we should only be focusing on energy in versus energy out. Okay, so really what we were looking at is whole day energy expenditure. So how do you use your calories versus how many calories you take in. But what then, I suppose, especially with the female athlete triad, where, you know, the menstrual cycle was getting interrupted, bone was starting to get a bit weaker in females, what they actually discovered was it was this energy in versus energy out wasn't really the problem. What the problem was that how much calories have you left over for your basic functioning when you finish your exercise bout. So what we now know is that locomotion or exercise or movement takes priority over everything else in the body. So if you're an athlete and you're burning loads of calories through exercise, well, your body's not going to just stop running or stop lifting weights, or, you know, what it will do is it will take calories from other areas. So for example, it will essentially start slowly closing down the reproductive system because it's thinking, do you know what, you can't even look after yourself. I'm not going to allow you to create another human. It will take from the bone, because basically what your body is saying is, I'm built to survive. You don't need really, really strong bone for survival. You can lie in bed and still survive. And you're prioritizing this exercise. So essentially, in a nutshell, it just looks at, have you enough calories left over when you finished exercising for basic body functions?
This would have become very topical in females over the last few years, and that period tends to go away. That's amenorrhea, is it?
Yeah.
Same thing, they notice a lot of issues with bone mineral density and stress fractures, everything like that. There was a quite good video, I came around last year sometime, with Mary Kane, a runner over in the Oregon Project. I was showing the 6 years a few weeks ago, just around how her coaches were so insistent that she lose weight, consistently under eating. It was, of course, over 2 years, ended up with 5 different stress fractures in her lower body.
Oh, jeez.
I lost her period for up to 3 months at a time, maybe get it back once and then lose it for the same period again. And as she said herself, the biggest issue was her mood went down, but also by a mile her performance completely dropped. The most talented high school athlete in America at the time, and never progressed at all college-wise. But you're looking then more so in males than females. Is it because it's possibly not as highlighted in that, like, it's really obvious if a female is struggling there because, you know, period disappears, whereas in males it's not as obvious and can sometimes be kind of like, oh, I'm really tired, you need to man up a bit, like
oh
that
yeah,
kind of where you're coming from with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And exactly that. So like, it is really obvious, like if a female's menstrual cycle is interrupted for 3 or more, you know, cycles, then you have amenorrhea, let's look at this. With males it's not as easy to notice it. And like, I suppose anecdotally, you see why this was kind of triggered was, like, athletes, cyclists, for example, were falling off the bike and they were ending up getting these breaks that were lifelong career enders, you know, and it was kind of going, how have this group of athletes have such bad bone density? And they put it down to not doing enough, you know, weight bearing exercise, and, you know, not doing enough, you know, weights or plyometrics, or not having their feet on the ground enough. But then it started to become apparent in long distance runners. And again, they were saying, well, you don't hit the ground as hard as you would if you were a sprinter, you know, if you're a long distance runner. So, so the generation of force isn't as great. But again, is there something else we could look at here? So I suppose the seminal research was done in 2014 is when it kind of kicked off. And initially it was all in kind of aesthetic athletes, so endurance athletes, which is what I kicked off with. But like, I'll be honest, the data that I'm after pulling from last season alone, and even when I was looking at just nutritional knowledge or just nutritional intake papers in the GAA, like, I think team sports are going to be in a little bit more trouble than what they expected. But because of the fact that they do, you know, weights and plyometrics and explosive type work, they might get away with it a little bit. But at the same time, the calories are not there, their calories are not there. Just because your bones aren't being damaged doesn't mean the damage hasn't been done in other systems. You know?
Yeah, because was it Luke O'Brien had out last year, the year before, how 2 inter-county Gaelic football teams were way under consuming carbohydrate. I had and Damien did a very similar project for our masters around, like, just intake and knowledge around it, and it just wasn't where it needs to be at all. And while probably getting some form of protective effect just from running around the pitch and doing the weights, it is likely to just catch up on them at some stage. Have you found it, though, more prevalent in endurance athletes, or is it just likely to be more prevalent because there's possibly a greater energy expenditure in general, or with the training load to some GAA players now, it's probably not far off the same?
Yeah, like the training loads that GAA are under now at the moment is close to professional in some aspects. As well as that, what I have definitely seen a trend in is, and it's been published in a couple of papers where it's been suggested, was it might not actually be calories. There could be more of an emphasis placed on carbohydrate availability, exactly what you suggested in Luke O'Brien's paper. And which was funny, the initial data that I analysed for the endurance athletes, they weren't that low. Like some of them were on the cusp of low energy availability, but they might have been between 20 and 30. And if it's lower than 30, you know, you're heading into danger zone. But they were kind of between the 20 and 30. There was one guy that was quite low. But in the GAA, the figure is coming out at about 78% of them have low energy availability, and there is a direct correlation between that and carbohydrates. Like and like that, Luke's paper like supports that on average they're taking in between maybe 3 and 4 grams per kg, and that doesn't matter if it's pre-season or in season, because you know they've been looking at there was another paper, can't think of who it was now, but there was another paper looking at, you know, competition and looking at 5 days, so 2 days before competition, the day of the match, and then 2 days after. And even though we're all harping on about carb loading and how it's important for athletes, it's not really translating. So even though the recommendations are up to close to 8, you know, between 5 and 8, like you could say, depending on the position, the carbs I think are the one that's the driver, and that's my opinion, but it's also, you know, after being supported in some research along the way as well.
And is some of that restriction potentially there because not public health messaging, but the mixed messaging around people who try and say it's for public health, it sound like, oh, you need to be leaner, we need to reduce our carbohydrates, living, and even more and more people pushing the low carb or carb free diets? Is that having both an effect on, as you saw from Luke's paper, that like the high speed run towards the end of the game went way down, but now in the longer term, just general health benefits, or not benefits, impacts, yeah. And you know what, I do think for team sports, particularly in GAA, because it's really like Dublin have set the tone for professionalism, like 100%, and they've got set standards and you know the whole lot, but I think that there's too much emphasis on body fat in some ways. And like, you know, I've been asked from time to time to take body fat, and my question is why? Are they not performing? Oh, they're looking a little bit out of shape, but are they performing? Because then, like, it's so easy to, especially with Gaelic football, you know, you have to be robust and you have to be able to take a tackle and you have to be able to take a shoulder. And for some guys, they need that little bit more body fat to be a little bit more robust. And I think that has fed into a negative culture in some ways. I also think that, you know, I don't know, like a lot of teams are only getting nutritionists in on a kind of a full-time capacity now. And even less so, like we got in we're after getting in a psychologist this year. But like you could probably count on your 2 hands the number of teams who have a psychologist, you know, heavily involved. And I think the mental health side of things, and, you know, even like, especially with males, they're like, they won't get an eating disorder. They won't get disordered eating because they're men. No, that's a woman thing. But they do, you know, and it's everywhere. That's what Lewis is like. You probably know Lewis from WIT doing it in jockeys, and again, there's probably quite an impact of just a long-term calorie restriction that's leading to a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
And even like I saw a paper come out recently that just like that. Larkin Daly in Athlone, how looking at markers of recovery after games, and the strongest relationship or association was between lower body fat with quicker times to recover. But you need to understand a bit more around that as well, to say, oh, we need to get our players leaner so they recover faster. It's more so like a proxy measure for just being in better shape. But also, I think what's really important to remember around reducing body fat is the rate of change, or how quickly you drop body fat. Like I was with a team a few years ago, they all got Dexed. One lad went from 12 to 9% over a 2.5-3 month period, and he was so happy with himself. The manager was like, oh, this is brilliant. I was like, this is a bit quick. His performance was terrible for the rest of the season, kept picking up little niggles. He always said, I just keep feeling so tired. Whereas a few other lads who maybe went from 14 to 13, while nowhere near as lean, but because the rate of change was so much slower and more gradual, like their performance just continued to track up from there. So I think it's important to have like a nod to body fat, but understanding there's ranges and they're very, very individual, but also what I think is really important is how quickly you change from one to the other and how that fluctuates throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think if you are going down the route of changing someone's body composition and it's for sport, like if it's not an aesthetic, sport, for example, if it's a team-based sport, you have to monitor their performance closely. And even like subjective markers, how they're feeling, their energy levels, their moods, it can have an awful psychological effect if you're struggling to get to a standard that you don't even know. Like sometimes I'm wondering, like, what is the standard and who set it? And everyone's different and everyone's unique. As I said, I've seen players who play better when they're maybe at that 13-14%, and played dreadful if they were down at 9%. And performance, that's what we forget about. This is the thing, the goal, the core. And sometimes we just focus too much on the spokes that come out of it, That's why us guys have to keep it real, I suppose.
I suppose because that's such a big area, how have you found communicating to, say, a coach or a manager that this is actually something that it's not linear, it's not, performance doesn't improve just because body fat go down. How have you managed, or what kind of experience do you have with maybe changing someone's mindset with that? Because I do know for me that's definitely a big struggle. It's a big obstacle that I come across pretty regularly. But how have you found it?
Yeah, I have to say, I have been very, very lucky with the management team that I'm working with. The nutrition and that side of stuff is my baby to look after, and but I do know, and like that yourself, you said you had some experience too. Like I do know some of my colleagues and peers have had negative experiences and have met a lot of resistance, and as a result then maybe players don't buy into the culture you're trying to adopt. I'll be honest with you, I think you have to pick your battles as well, and there's certain things, like I know initially when I started working with the Tip lads, I was like, these are an elite team, they will only eat elite food. And didn't work. The lads are like, well, I'm not going to eat the post-match meal if it's only chicken and pasta. I'm sick of eating chicken and pasta. And I've probably gone against the grain a little bit, where I've been ringing up hotels, booking meals, and they're like, sorry, you want a roast? I'm like, yeah, the lads will eat a roast. And they're like, who are you ringing on behalf of again? I'm like, the Tipperary footballers. She's like, you want gravy? Oh yeah. So I have to say I'm probably the wrong person to ask in terms of approaching the manager and stuff. Anytime that there has been a question mark over some players' body composition, the manager has been really, really approachable. And, sometimes I can say to him, listen, he could do it losing a few pounds, but he's got a game in 3 weeks' time, and I really don't think that this is the right time to do it, and because it could affect his performance. And I'm really lucky that David Power is a performance and a player-centred coach, to be quite honest. So now look, next season, this coming season could show up a little bit differently when, we've got higher targets to try and reach. But I think, at the moment, I can't really give you much else for that question. As I said, I've just been so lucky.
I've noticed before that the manager and the caterer insist on a roast dinner if it was a Sunday game, and the players like, we actually hate roast, we don't want it at all, and that was a big battle. But then the manager was also insistent on not letting them drink ate in the hour before the game. It was like, you do know most of them are having caffeine tablets or pre-workouts, which is predominantly caffeine. Oh no, that tea will sit in their stomach, we're banning that.
Lads, I've heard I've actually heard the craziest thing. So one of my students was an intern with a hurling team, and he was like to me one day, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah. And he said, so would you let the lads have cream in their soup before a match? And I was like, well, no, just because I could run through them, and really looking for trouble then. And he was like, but what would you do if there was? And I was like, well, I kind of say to them, listen lads, if you've any tummy issues, I wouldn't really, just eat your dinner instead. And so he was like, well, I'm the team that I'm working with, he said, the nutritionist absolutely freaked out when there was cream in the soup. He said, so he made the team do sprints to try and get rid of the cream. I was like, to make them sick, was it? And he was like, no, he just said that it would help burn off the fat in the cream. I said, doing sprints. I was like, anaerobic exercise to burn off fat. Okay, and the players probably hate him as a result. Like, I'm sure the coach wasn't too happy either with doing these like maximal sprints beforehand. But like, and that was only, I think, the last year. So
I'm shocked that a nutritionist has that much power over a team to be allowed to do sprints at a certain time. Like, how'd you get into this role?
Lads, I wouldn't tell the players to walk quicker. Never mind, But yeah, look, I mean, there's funny things like, and look, different nutritionists have different way of doing things. I know nutritionists that wouldn't be happy with, say, the lads drinking my waddy after training or a match. But like, for me, I'm like, well, hydration, I don't really care if they drink my waddy or water, as long as they're hydrated, I'm okay with that, And look, everyone has the reasons for doing things, but you kind of have to work with the team as well.
That's mainly a tip. You said you're involved a bit with Waterford as well, is it?
Yeah, so I just taken up the role with the Waterford ladies football. Now it's remote, so I'm doing most of the stuff online through Zoom. I'll go down for a couple of just testing sessions for body composition and working with the players one-to-one outside of that. So it was something I was kind of on the fence, wouldn't I? But because it's remote, it's just a little bit easier for me. I'd only have to go down maybe 2 or 3 times during the year. They can't bring me to matches or anything like that either, so it's okay.
Do you ever be in a situation where you're slightly concerned about, because different counties or even doing little bits with club teams around like conflict of interest and that? Because I know Damien there benefited from it during the week with me having an awful conflict of interest with 2 teams in one county. But sometimes like, these are a senior team, but these are an intermediate, but they're in the same county. So is it all right? Or am I like, could I be stealing secrets from one and giving to the other? Or because they're different competitions, is it all right?
I wouldn't have taken up the role now with I wouldn't taken up a role with another male football team, put it that way. And I did say it to David first before I took on the role, and he had no problem with it. So I'd be very transparent about it, and as I said, like, it was quite clear from the outset that the tip lads they're my priority, in terms of, I don't mean that, but as in like physically. I'm at 3 training sessions a week. Game, like, depending on COVID numbers, I'll be there at the games. Whereas with Waterford, it was a little bit more distant. So that's the only reason I was able to take it on.
So yeah, I suppose, Amy, we're just kind of looking to get a little bit of background on what kind of lectures you oversee at the moment, and just maybe what got you into these areas. Did you just fall into them? Were you pushed into them, or did you have to fight people on the street to get into some of them?
Okay, so when I started teaching in LIT, I was just kind of thrown into some modules. So because previous lecturers had their modules. Now, in saying that, I teach exercise physiology, which I love, and I have that all the time because everyone else hates it. So I was kind of cornered, but it was a kind of a welcomed, module for me. Plus, it's kind of safe in a way because I kind of know I'll probably have it every year because no one else wants it. So, but I love teaching that. The sports nutrition, Michael Fennelly actually taught that for the first couple of years, and he's a little bit bigger than me, so the fight, I mightn't have won the fight yet. But as time went on, then I kind of started to merge into the sports nutrition side of things. Michael kind of went more into kind of coaching and fitness stuff. And he actually has a degree in business, so the kind of businessy side of things he was quite good at teaching as well. So yeah, at the moment I'm teaching in the applied strength and conditioning course. So I teach 1st to 4th years. I've taught lots of different modules at different times, but my main ones, as I said, are nutrition and exercise physiology. I'm also course director on, we have a certificate and we have a master's in health and well-being in the workplace. So that was something that kind of came by surprise. We said we put in for funding for a short course and the interest was phenomenal. So we then developed it into, again, we said, you know what, we'll throw in for a bit of funding. We'll see, can we get a level 9? We got that. And I think we have a waiting list of, I think it's 300 people for next year. So it's like we do it in-house. We're doing it in-house from next year, but we do it online as well. So it's a flexible learning course. So that's kind of the space that I'm teaching in at the moment. And yeah, I've taught, as I said, other different modules. Like I taught monitoring and whatever thing is called monitoring. monitoring load and something else or something like that anyway. But it was something I had to kind of learn on the fly. It wasn't something that I was really 100% comfortable, but I learned a lot. And it kind of helps me to understand, like, you know, where the S&C is coming from, where the sports scientists are coming from a little bit more. But yeah, that's kind of the main areas that I've been teaching in, and how I got into them, I suppose.
And do you find, I suppose from the nutrition side of it, that it's an area that students are very much interested in, like that it really draws their attention, or is it something that some kind of go with the flow with, like it's something I have to do and it's just part of the course?
Yeah, I definitely have found that every year that I've taught it, I've probably had about 3 or 4 students that you just know they're going to go ahead and go into that line of work. And that's kind of what they're going to use the strength and conditioning course as a sort of a sounding board, you know, and move on from there. Then there's probably like the middle of the road people who are like, you know what, I like food, I'm interested in nutrition a bit, it's not that hard, and I'll kind of just like that, go with the flow. And then you've just some people who are, you know, maybe 1 or 2 in the class who just have no interest. So you kind of just don't take that personally, and you just look, they came to do strength and conditioning. So not everyone is going to be into nutrition, but you're always going to have a couple that are. Now, where we do have, we've had every year now nearly 1 or 2 students who think that because they've done a 5-credit module in nutrition, that they are a nutritionist. And that's taxing. So, because like, you know, everyone wants to know, why am I doing this module? And you're like, but do you ask that when you're doing, do you think you're a psychologist when you finish 5 credits of psychology? You know, do you think you're an accountant when you finish 5 credits of basic spreadsheet stuff, whatever they do in accountancy, you know? So like I had a student this year, and he basically told me that he didn't see the need to do a course in nutrition because he kind of knew it all. And he thinks that he'd get a lot of experience and learn from other people. He doesn't need a qualification. He thinks they were overrated.
All right. Yeah, you've kind of beat me to my next question there, which is going to be like, how do you, I suppose, approach that with students? I suppose making it like abundantly clear that you're learning the basics of nutrition here, that so that you could possibly support an individual or an athlete afterwards, but not so that you can go out and be a nutritionist. I suppose it's I guess it sounds like I'm kind of protecting my own work in some ways, but it's a contentious enough area where you're regularly met with misinformation, and you start piecing back where this stuff comes from. A lot of it comes from people who just don't have an actual qualification or education in nutrition, or an in-depth education there. So yeah, like what kind of steps do you take to try and get that message across, I guess?
I think that's a really good question. And you know what, if you'd asked me that maybe last year or the year before, I probably would have just given you some rambly answer. But what we've actually done, because we've seen it, and like it's not only happening with nutrition, like in like strength and conditioning is broad, you know. So what we actually did was we changed the course. So we did a massive overhaul. And to try and avoid that from happening, what we actually did was we changed the course from being only 5 credits of nutrition to 15 credits of nutrition. And then we also put in place where they can do a nutrition specific work placement, you know, where they work, I'd be their supervisor, and then they can do their FYP where it's more nutrition specific. And what we've also done is we've highlighted the pathways. So like if they want to go do their masters, we'll say, in GMIT, well, they need to have 15 credits done of basic nutrition. So that's kind of what we're telling them, so that they can see what the progression actually is, instead of thinking, well, this is the module I'm after doing, so I have to be qualified. We're kind of saying, look, this is your starting point, or your undergraduate, starting point, and then you can move on to your masters. And the other thing that we've done as well is, instead of just giving out to them, we've actually written, we have undergraduate course ready to go. So we, in LIT, we have developed a suite of courses that we're going to be establishing year after year after year, as opposed to all in the one go. And one of them is at the end of it, so you will be a sport and exercise nutritionist. That will be affiliated with the AFN and Centre. So what we've essentially done is everyone is common first year, and then in second year, then you start to go into your kind of your chosen or your specified area. So we started off with the overhaul of the applied strength and conditioning, September gone. We've the masters kicking off now, September coming, and then we're looking then at as I said, rolling out the suite of courses then, and we're merging with AIT as well, which is a really, really exciting thing that's happening in September too. So lots of really exciting things coming from that space. But I suppose what we're trying to do is, instead of hammering a message home to the students, you can't do this, what we're trying to do is, well, look, we're great. We're really delighted that you want to go into this area of nutrition, but let us help you get there. And we're trying to establish pathways so that they're not just wobbling off at the end going, yeah, I know everything. So we kind of just thought we go for a more proactive approach.
That's brilliant, and I'm delighted to hear that, just because there's so much confusion, and there's so much kind of, I suppose, I won't allow it, it's some nonsense, I suppose, but opinion-based, I suppose, I feel like a lot of people, either because they eat food, think that therefore they basically are covered from a nutrition perspective, or they believe in something, or they've heard something from some athlete somewhere in the world has done something, and therefore will apply it to everyone. And so it's great to kind of see that, I suppose, approach happening at the moment. Because it is a worrying area, to be honest. I mean, it's definitely keeping me busy. That's for sure. But it's that's fantastic. And are there any areas, I suppose, that you feel you'd still like to develop in that line in the courses, or do you feel like you've really kind of nailed your approach at the moment from a nutrition perspective?
I think for now that we are on the right track, but I think you'll agree that this industry is so ever changing, and it's always evolving. So, and I think that's the reason why, in colleges, that they have a 5-year cycle for most courses, where you do update them then after the end of the 5 years. So I think for now this is the probably best approach to take. We are also in an uncertain environment where we need to see what we look like when we are actually merged with AIT, and really focus on our strengths and see where that takes us, and because like with anything, you have a panel of staff at the moment, but in a year or even 2 years, you can see a massive change in the clientele or in the personnel that you're dealing with. So you kind of have to wait and see. So we won't run before we can even crawl or walk at this stage. We'll kind of see how this goes and then work from there.
That's a really interesting idea about the kind of the general first year, and then you branch off. It's similar to doing general engineering and then going to civil, electronic, whatever like that. Are you looking to do kind of replicate something similar? And will that end up, can you do that in either LIT, you said the traditional LIT base in Thurles, or in Athlone, or will it be kind of confined to one?
I'll be honest, I don't know. That's the answer I can give you. And I do think that's probably why they decided to roll out the Masters in September, because that can happen whatever way it looks. And then what we'll do is we'll probably, have a look. We have these courses developed, they're already written. And let's see what's best for the demographic of students that we're trying to attract on both campuses. And as well as that, we nearly have 3 or 4 campuses to work off, because we have Athlone, then we've got Thurles, which is a really strong campus in LIT, and then you're looking at the Limerick side of things as well. So we'll just wait and see what it looks like. But LIT, through their business courses, that's the approach and the structure that they would take. Business with, so that's the kind of the business with model is I suppose what we were kind of aiming for, and it's very successful in that area. So there's no reason why it shouldn't be successful in the area of kind of exercise and sport.
And it's important as well, because it's not generally done in silos. Even you as a nutritionist, you probably work with the S&C coach a bit to chat things out. We actually had Robbie on about a month ago, or the same, you're chatting to the manager, you might be chatting to the skills coach. So it's good, even if someone is going into that role, that they have an understanding of, well, I'm here as a nutritionist, but I get how a lot of the exercise stuff works, so it helps me as a nutritionist inform whatever we're doing or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, 100%. Even communication. So many students graduate and they actually they don't fully grasp the importance of communication, but they also don't fully grasp working as a team. And just because your idea is not taken on board, some people don't take that very well. Their resilience to, resistance or change or being said, told no, it's something that does have to be fostered a little bit better.
Yeah, and stuff like that as well would probably even just help. Sometimes like the slightest thing can cause conflict, like a mix up in terminology or little things like that, and people being clear on, okay, what this term actually means can just clear things up so quickly for so many people.
Yeah, 100%.
No, that's all been really good. Something we're trying to do more often now with when we get nutritionists on is to have a few set questions that we run through, a mixture of fun, advice, whatever like that. And we're trying them today, so we'll see how it goes. Some will be quicker if you want to spend a bit more time on any, that's grand. What was your favourite meal as a child?
Well, lads, I'll be honest, I was a devil for a packet of snacks. But my favourite meal was lamb chops, lamb cutlets. Loved it.
Nice.
Sheep farmer here is delighted to hear that.
And I don't really like lamb anymore. I find it really strong.
Did you overdo it as a child, maybe?
I don't know. Or maybe I just went a period. My mother then, she's really into saving the animals and stuff, which is great. She was probably ahead of her time. And I think then the kind of stopped. The lamb stopped. And then when I started eating it again, then I was like, whoa, how did I eat this when I was about 4, But yeah, that was something I really remember being like, oh, I love this dinner so much. Yeah.
What's the most common mistake you see people make in regard to nutrition?
Restricting. So I see that people, when people want to be healthy and they want to be good, they restrict things and they torture themselves. So I would always try and recommend to people, instead of trying to take something out, add something in. Usually, if people nail their hydration, or if they increase their fruit and veg intake or increase their protein intake, you probably find that the other stuff will start to fall away a little bit more naturally, and it won't feel like it's such a sacrifice. So that's one of the things that I notice that people kind of don't do very well, and they go with gung-ho, hell for leather, and then they fall off the wagon and they're like, I'm just an all or nothing person. So which is not always the case.
What was a novel or unexpected challenge you faced with an athlete or client, and how you overcame it?
Well, sure, look, I suppose we can't avoid the thing that is the pandemic. But I suppose what happened really, what was unexpected, was the numbers being cut. And we had fostered an environment where the nutritionist, and we were all there at every game and the whole lot. And, I kind of looked after all the food side of things, weighing in, weighing out, all that sort of stuff. And then with COVID coming in and the numbers being restricted, we ended up having to try and share out some of the responsibilities. I didn't get to go to all of the games. And I think, that the players in particular, I think it was an unusual thing for them, and it was trying to make sure that they were hydrating properly afterwards, and that the supplements and, all that kind of stuff was all laid out the way that the lads like it, that the way they're used to. And then you see as well, you're kind of, because of COVID, you're trying to make sure that you have enough stuff there, like reusable bottles, if they didn't have their own, if they took one slug out of a bottle, you had to bin it. So that for me was an unexpected, it was one thing trying to do all the work yourself, but trying to delegate all of the work. You realise just how much you're doing, and then you're giving people extra work to do on top of the work that they're doing. Our kit man is, if he is not nominated by the GAA, and I'm sure every team says the same, where would we be without the kitmen? Or women if it's a woman, but and he took on a huge role. Our liaisons officer took on a huge role when I couldn't attend, and so that was something that I found really difficult. And I was delighted then to be able to go to the Munster final and the All-Ireland semi with the boys. It just took pressure off everybody, and everyone could enjoy the day a little bit more, because it was just normal for us in a time when normal was gone. That was that little bit of normality was there for us all. And I felt I like to do it myself. I'm a bit of a control freak. So I was waiting at home watching things, going, oh my God, did they put the right drink out there now? So yeah, that was probably the biggest thing over the last while.
That's a great point on the kitman. Worth their weight in gold.
Oh my God, Mert Kennedy is our lad, and he is just phenomenal.
It was Pat Delaney when I was at Laois there, and even the following year when they won the McDonagh Cup, they brought him up to lift the cup with the captain and everything.
Totally understand.
What's your favourite home cooked meal, or what would you cook for someone if you're trying to impress?
Well, I have to say that I'm actually more of a baker. And I actually have to say I'm fairly good at an alfredo. I actually love, even though like, I think as well when you're a nutritionist, everyone thinks you're going to come out like bloody Nigella, but that's not the case. I'm not a chef. I understand what's in the food, but I love making fakeaways. And I love like things like I have a really nice recipe for like doner kebabs, and it's savage. Like it's absolutely savage. Or I love like making homemade taco fries, that sort of thing, where you still have the comfort of the fake way, but you know that it's nutritious as well. And I don't believe in associating guilt, but I just find I enjoy it more because I'm not going to feel, sluggish or sick afterwards. And it's such a nice surprise if you were cooking something for someone and they're like, oh my God, this is a healthy, nutritious taco fries and it tastes savage. So that would be kind of my go-to. I love kind of having that kind of stuff. I love my mother's spaghetti bolognese, and my husband makes the best lasagna I've ever had, ever. Now, big mistake on his part making it because the pressure, but yeah, they would be kind of my three things, like a fake away, spaghetti bolognese and lasagna.
What's your go-to meal or snack when you're in a rush?
I have to say I'm after probably buying Aldi out of those, I don't know if you've seen the pouches, the McGuire pouches. Hang on.
Most people listen to this, so it might be lost on a few.
It'll be lost on you, but at least you guys can see it. The McGuire pouches. So these are high protein yogurt, 15 grams of protein in a pouch. You don't need a spoon. You can actually drink it like a Capri Sun, basically. But it's like it's like a yop. So I think that they are the handiest grab and go things ever. Like, I know we could say energy balls and protein balls and whatever, but if you don't buy them, you have to make them. And even though they are handy, like, don't get me wrong, but they'd be my go-to. I usually would have one of them and a banana in the car with me if I was, had to head into campus or anything like that. So they are I'm after telling everyone now, and Aldi will definitely be scarce on them now. It's already hard enough.
That's this week's sponsors sorted.
Yeah, I think the brand is Graham's Family.
What's your top tip for meal prep or bulk cooking? I saw you had the slow cooker out for the LIT Health and Wellbeing series. Would you be using that a good bit?
Oh yes, yeah. No, I look, when I was eating out of a lunchbox all the time, I was a dab hand at the meal prep. But now that we're working from home, I suppose I probably don't do it enough, and I have to actually share the secret that my mother cooks my dinners now that I'm working from home. Yeah.
So
it's a good meal trip back.
So the takeaway tip is get your mum to keep doing the cooking for you. You won't have to bother prepping anything.
Yeah, no. But when I was, what I would say about the slow cooker, right? First thing, if you are cooking chicken, and if you actually watch the video, you'll know this, but you might just seen the video. If you're cooking chicken in it, cook the chicken as a whole breast. Because even if you're batch cooking, you might want to cook maybe 5 or 6 breasts, for the week or whatever it is. If you cut them up small or into, if you dice them or slice them, it's going to start flaking and falling away. And like, that's not probably going to be the most palatable by the time you've reheated it or whatever. So my first tip is to cook your chicken breasts whole. My second tip is don't add the vegetables. We're all love the idea of the slow cooker because you can throw the food into it in the morning and then it's done when you get home that evening. But a lot of complaints that people have is that the veg can become quite soggy. So what I would say is, okay, use your slow cooker to your advantage, but just make sure you're actually going to eat the food that's in it. So don't add the vegetables until the last hour, and they'll kind of retain their crunchiness, and cut them slightly bigger if you can. The other thing I would say about the batch cooking and stuff is don't do it for the whole week if you possibly can. Only do maybe 2 or 3 days at a time, because it gives you a lot more to work with. There's not too many food types or products that will last 5 or 6 days after being prepared. So, try your best to maybe allocate a Sunday and a Wednesday give or take. So try and maybe do it maybe twice a week if you possibly can.
To give us a slight little tip there for slow cooker recipes, a big joint of ham and a bottle of Coke Zero. Cook it in that.
Oh, that sounds nice now.
Do you have a nutrition pet peeve or a myth that drives you mad when you hear it?
I suppose the whole idea around carbs, like they're after getting, and creatine. The creatine one actually probably bothers me the most. I think it's the most misunderstood supplement, nutrient, substance, whatever you want to call it. First of all, people think that, they think that it'll damage your kidneys. Then they think that if you take it, you're going to end up like the Michelin Man. And like, neither are actually true, Like I would often ask my students, hands up who takes creatine, and have a show of hands, and why do you take it? To get bigger. Okay. What do you do? Do you go to the gym or not? So I definitely think that my pet peeve is that people like assume things without fact. And I kind of like to describe creatine as an overdraft where, you've got this storage of energy in your muscle, and creatine essentially works like an overdraft where you can tap in to get a couple of extra reps or a couple of extra sprints, and that helps you to get faster or to get stronger or to get bigger. But you have to do the work as well. And I suppose, even the thing around water weight and stuff like that creatine can end up, causing. It's about knowing how to use it and how to supplement with it. So that's kind of that would be my pet peeve, where I think, supplements can be misunderstood big time.
We were actually doing supplements in 5th year PE for the leaving cert end of it. And I'm just talking about, here are some of the different supplements. Here's ones that have good science behind them, all like that. And one girl's like, "Sir, does creatine work?" Yeah, but like, I know it's not banned, sir, but can we get a petition going to try and get it banned, because it has to be illegal. I don't know where she was getting this from. She was just convinced it was steroid like in its effects. Tea or coffee?
Okay, if I'm at home, I drink tea. And I'm a very systematic person. And if I'm out, I'll drink coffee. And mainly because, lads, I'm not paying $2.50 for a cup of tea. No way. I'm not doing it in a cafe or a restaurant or whatever. I will always drink a cup of coffee in the morning. But as a rule, I'd be a tea drinker at home. And as I said, I love a little cappuccino out and about.
What advice would you give to someone who would like to work in nutrition?
My advice would be to be willing to do some unpaid work to get experience at first, because it's a really, really hard industry to get in. But once you're in, and once you do a good job, you'd be really surprised to see the work really flowing in. The other thing I would just definitely advise is just accept that it's not that glamorous. And you really do have to love it. But I love it, and you guys love it, so love the industry and whatever, but you have to be willing to work hard, and you have to be willing to take I know I have to keep saying it, but the non-glamorous side, and just dig deep, get in, and don't be afraid to ask questions. I think in the sport, exercise, leisure industry, too many people suffer with the Dunning-Kruger effect, the one where you think you know it all. And I definitely see it, especially as people just graduate. For example, when they should be really open-minded and trying to learn as much as they can from experience and from practical side of things, they think because they've learned a bit in college, for example, that's it, I know it all now. And they can really shoot themselves in the foot. So just be aware that the more you know, the more you don't know. And that's the thing that you have to be very aware of if you want to be at the top of your game.
Yeah, that's really good. Last one then. One thing you'd recommend that would improve most people's health or performance. It doesn't have to be nutrition related.
I can't even believe I'm saying this, but mindfulness. I think I do think, and I had to learn this the hard way myself, but I think taking a little bit of time out, I use the Calm app. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I actually did 10 minutes on Calm right before this.
It's amazing. The 10-minute daily Calm. Sometimes like I think we don't stop and slow down enough, and then I think everything gets affected, because if your brain gets kind of full and you're overthinking, like when you go to sleep, that's why your thoughts like whiz, because it's the only time you actually slow down. So if you can clear your mind a little bit during the day, and essentially like you're creating space, it's like closing off a few tabs on your computer, it'll run a lot smoother. You'll sleep better. We know that when we don't sleep right, we probably don't eat right the next day either. We probably don't exercise to our potential, you know, if we're doing an exercise session, because we're wrecked. So like I do think that there's a lot to be said about taking even that 10 minutes and just be. And like you become so much more productive. And like as I said, if you had asked me this last year, I probably would have come out with some nutrition based piece of advice. But I just think that this is probably at the core of a lot of productiveness, you know, if we allow it to happen.
That's really good answers there. Thanks a million. Damien or Shane, have you anything else you want to hop in with?
No, I'm just. I want to commend you on the context that you gave for each one of those questions. It was fantastic.
Thank you. I love talking.
I think this is the podcast I've laughed the most during. Just
Yeah,
you've been very
definitely.
entertained
It's
about
very
all your answers
enjoyable.
as well. Yeah.
Oh God, lads, if I could, I'd love to write a book on some of my experiences with, you know, throughout my time. But like, you know, I don't know, I might get sued or something. But I know I wouldn't. But you know,
Keep
like
it
lads,
anonymous.
yeah, I could. I'd be like, I don't know if you watch Bridgerton. No,
I hadn't.
no. No, never mind. It's lost on you guys. There's girls here that know. No, sure. Look, lads, I honestly believe if you can't have a laugh at this stage, sure, God, we'd have nothing.